don't think we'll consider this an official meeting of the Housing Committee, given we don't have a quorum, but I think just for a conversation, excuse me? I don't know. Yeah. So I think it's just kind of an unofficial meeting to try and like do some organization around how to move forward. Oh, here's Sean. Hey, Sean, how's it going? Hey, Dan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you being here. So I'm going to try and facilitate this conversation, at least just to kind of get us moving. And I think, there's just a couple different questions we need to figure out. Number one is how many people are actually on the Housing Committee? My understanding is that it's been 9, that there are 9 seats. Clearly, we don't have a quorum if that's the case. If there's 3 remaining members, I heard from Harry this afternoon that she's no longer on this committee. So the only people I know that are officially on this committee are Dan, and Sean. So in order to achieve quorum, we're going to have to recruit new members. One of the things that we just talked about it, and I talked to the former chair of the Housing Committee earlier today, and she said that they routinely had trouble achieving a quorum. So that maybe actually reducing the number to 7.
Yeah.
And maybe having a couple alternates. I mean, ideally we would have 9, but having a couple alternate seats so that we can try and achieve that quorum regularly, I think would be a good idea.
Yeah, I think that 7 and a 2 for the alternate, I think that's a good way to go. We can always change it later, but
Great. Just to be clear, like what I think we'll do here, right, is just have this conversation, come up with ideas like that one, and then make recommendations to the full council to approve. And that would be the way we would do this. For example, changing the number of people on the committee.
Yeah, that would be something you could work with Evelyn to. Can I ask if there are other committees? You mentioned Tori mentioned not being able to fill the homelessness task force committee. Is this a common problem across committees?
I don't know any.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we should just like talk about is, we had over half the committee resign, right? And so I think we should just acknowledge that, talk about like why that happened. And, I want to make sure, I just really appreciate the 3 of you continuing to serve and to show up, and I want to make sure, I know all of us do, the entire council want to make sure that this is a valuable experience for you and that we can actually make a meaningful contribution through this work. And so I don't know if any of you want to like just talk about like what you think, we could do better moving forward to ensure that the committee is successful. Would love to hear that feedback.
I don't know everybody here, so.
Oh, do you want to have introductions? Great.
Yeah.
Let's do introductions. I'm Ben Doyle, City Councilor from District 1.
Jim Sheridan, City Councilor from District 3.
Dan Kopic, I live in District 2, and I think I'm the senior member of the Housing Committee.
Great.
Despite only having been on it for about 18 months.
Great.
I'm Carrie Brown. I'm the council member from District 3.
Sean Sheehan. I'm also on the Housing Committee. I had been on it since the beginning too, but yeah, happy to have that
Great
conversation.
Good. And Dan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, and I'm Dan Wheeler and on the Housing Committee and joined, I think, in January.
Great. Okay. Great. So I don't know, Dan, Sean, or Dan, do you want to provide? Oh, right.
Serve on the scores and serve on the Blanco, also the complete streets.
Great.
A resident of School Street, District 1.
Great. Thank you.
I'm Bree from Commitee. I'm the co-chair for the homelessness task force. And I'm here because one of the proposals that's been raised by City Council over the past several months is to merge the task force with the Housing Committee. And so when the opportunity came up to be present at the revival of the Housing Committee, it seemed important to me that some of us show up here and learn what we're able to learn. I do want to say I'm concerned that the council chambers, I think, are not accessible in terms of handicapped accessibility, and that excludes at least one of the members of our task force. from being present. So I hope that'll be attended to.
Thanks for bringing that up, Tori. Anybody else want to introduce themselves?
I'm Evelyn Graham. I'm the communications coordinator for the city. Hi to everybody that I haven't met yet. As Ben said, I'm helping to facilitate on the city admin end, that anything I could do to support this committee. So I'm here. Thanks.
Great.
Thanks for being here, Evelyn.
Good. So do we want to have a conversation about just how we can ensure that the committee is successful moving forward? You know, are there concerns about, you know, where things kind of went off the rails that we want to surface?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. And speak to. I don't want to speak or put words in the mouths of other.
Talk into your mic.
Sure, of other members who left, but I think that in my understanding, I think there was a lot of work and a lot, obviously in something like housing, you know, it's a housing crisis nationally, a housing crisis in Vermont and here in Montpelier, a lot that needs to be done, you know, a lot that could be done. A lot takes a lot of money to do a lot of the measures on there. And so I think with a lot of the discussions with the housing committee kind of tackled along what other towns and cities in Vermont are doing in other parts of the country, what could be done here. But I think the importance of that link with maybe direction both ways, direction from city council before the housing committee goes too far down a path. I think those kind of check-ins back and forth to make sure that it's on the right track and that the work that the committee is doing is going to be useful, is sort of one thought. A second is looking at the areas. There's pieces like the housing trust fund that we overhauled over the period of a couple of years, I think wrapping up last year. And that's, you know, fairly small, but there are funds in it, and the purposes for a couple of purposes to that was overhauled too. And so my thought, I think going forward, I think if it's going to be successful or worthwhile, even if the scope is maybe less ambitious maybe than it could be, at least if it's working in an area we know will have a difference, in something like the trust fund is one area there. And then I think the second area, maybe without going too deep or work with the committee, is along the lines of keeping those lines open of what other towns are doing, what other things are happening around the country. If those are fed to the city council, maybe before too much work is done on the housing committee side, but you know, those kind of being fed up and then fed up the line, fed up the chain. And then if there's a sense of the city council wanted to give direction on an area to dig more, then the committee could know that their work would be worthwhile in that regard.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Dan, I don't know if you have anything you want to add?
Yeah. I want to echo Sean's thoughts quite a bit. It seems like there's two things I want to say. The first is the work that the committee has done over its course, from what I've has basically boiled down to three projects: overhauling the housing trust fund, working on the short-term rental regulations, and then working on the city plan updates. To explain what happened with the housing committee is to look at the results of that. The first was that the housing trust fund was implemented. What we recommend, or what the housing committee recommended, was implemented, but then the housing trust fund was not funded because that money was required to cover city budget shortfalls. The short-term rental proposal was adopted in part, but only, I think, a very weak first step part. And then the submission for the housing plan was I'm not entirely sure of what happened. It wasn't adopted as proposed, which I don't want to overstep in saying what happened there, but communication was not strongest. So of the three projects that our members put a lot of time and effort into, there was very little to show for it, which I think kind of boils down to reinforce it, or is the underpinning for the second part of what I want to say, which is that from my understanding of the housing committee so far, there are essentially two things that we do. We're a committee for a council to refer problems to us or things that they want us to work on. And then we send that back to council, presumably on the understanding that we're doing their work for them and that they're going to take our work seriously and implement some majority version of it. And then the second part is that we're a brainstorming kind of informational scheming body for the general public for interested parties to kind of learn about what other cities are doing, what we could be doing differently, what our barriers and obstacles to housing production in this community are. And those can feel at odds, not at odds, but like not clearly delineated. So, for example, with the short-term rental work, there was Tim Heaney, who was the council member on the housing committee, essentially was giving us feedback that he didn't approve of it. He and wouldn't vote for it. But other than that, there was like I think it kind of, the process went from start to finish without a check-in on a temperature check on council as a whole, rather than, and I think that could definitely be improved. Having input from the wider council at certain steps along our deliberate process. Another that also would have helped with the city plan.
Yeah.
To have specific, and I don't know what that looks like, if that requires one of the council members to attend city council, or the housing committee members to attend city council. That seems like the most straightforward. But I've never been to a city council meeting, so I don't know what those look like.
My understanding, and Carrie and Jim, like, jump in here, but like, I think that there's an expectation that the liaisons, the city council liaisons, which we are on this committee, that we could, during our councilor reports, report back on, so like at our next city council meeting, one of us will probably give an update that said we had an organizational meeting for the housing committee or these concerns, right? That I think, to your point, actually to both of you, it just felt like maybe a lack of kind of communication and a sense of consensus among council of like what the direction is the housing committee is going in, so that there wasn't really the opportunity to kind of support those efforts if there wasn't consensus about what was happening.
Well, and this is one of the things we talked about in our overall committee process is the role of city councilors on these committees. And it has not always been clear, and it's been different in different committees. But I think we've had some good discussions recently where we're in agreement that that's a part of our job here, is to be bringing that back to city council. So that's the liaison job. So I don't think, you can attend city council meetings if you want, go for it. But, but that we need to be doing that and then asking, the rest of city council, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
And then bring it back here. And that's not something that we have had built into our process so far in a very effective way, but I think we can do that going forward.
Right. And on the housing committee end, it hasn't been a part of on the housing committee end, it hasn't been a part of our regular agenda either to
Yeah. So I just want to make sure that we hear from Dan and then from anybody else who wants to speak to this. But Dan, do you want to, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I think I'm relatively new to the committee. So I just kind of, I guess, yeah, I agree. I guess in my short experience, it seemed like there was a communication breakdown, which kind of led to the, resignations, et cetera. That's just kind of my reflection on it. But beyond that, I see this as kind of a new chapter and excited to just kind of, move forward. So anyway, the lessons learned from my end are probably not that great. But yeah, so that's kind of that's
Great.
my 2 cents.
Thank you. And I just want to go to Tori. I think Tori had something and then we'll come back to you.
As much as I do would get used to being comfortable with the mic, but I'm not. From the point of view of the homelessness task force, I know this is a point of conversation and quite a bit of ambivalence right now, but I think that our primary concern, certainly my primary concern, if we were to merge with the Housing Committee or if individual members of the task force were to apply to be on the Housing Committee, the primary concern would be that what needs to happen to resolve homelessness is for municipalities and states to prioritize creating adequate, genuinely affordable housing for everyone who needs housing and providing whatever social and economic support is needed to get anybody who wants to be in housing housed and to help them stay housed. And that would certainly, if as an individual or as a task force, we had involvement with the Housing Committee, that would certainly be my agenda. And I'm guessing that would be our collective agenda, that the urgent crisis right now is not for how comfortably off people can have nicer houses. It's for how to get the several hundred people who are living in the woods right now into housing and help them stay in housing. I think there was something else I wanted to say, but I can't remember now what it was.
We'll have time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Tori. Dan, did you have something?
Yeah, just to say that failure of communication wasn't the only
Yeah.
issue. There were, I don't want to, I think to put it as ideological differences would be putting it too strongly, but I think there was kind of a difference in some pretty particular around the short-term rental things that there were some pretty stark differences in opinion between what the people who essentially self-select to be on the Housing Committee out of interest, out of background, out of desire to make a difference in this particular realm join to do, and then to put it to city council, which has a much different kind of subject mandate. And I don't know how to address that.
Thank you. I actually think that my hope is that there is a way to address that because we now do have an adopted city plan. We have a draft strategic work plan for the city council. One of the focus areas is housing. And then we also have the housing recommendations for the city plan that came out of this committee, but that didn't get integrated into the city plan. And so my thought was if we take those 3 documents and we just do an analysis of like, where's the Venn diagram on the 2 or 3 things that everybody seems to be in agreement on are, good strategies to pursue. That might be a way, I think that if we can just really form consensus of the council saying, hey, this is a housing issue that we think is really, we can gain traction on. Can you folks help us engage the public on it, do research on it, come up with recommendations to implement it? I feel like we could really work as a team in that way. Steve and then Tori.
I don't think we can paper over the dysfunction. The email that I'm going to read from was sent to a couple of these members, but not to any of the counselors that are here. It was sent to the mayor and Palin and Sal. But this is a context on what went wrong with the committee. And it's fundamental. You know, I don't think papering over what went wrong, because it's going wrong in other areas. I've brought this to your attention. We're discouraging public participation, and pretending like there's not problems is not going to help resolve it. So over the past 2 years, the Housing Committee has struggled with engagement from the Planning Department to engage within the Country Club Road project, and most recently the master planning process. Any engagement that's occurred has been at a level as if the committee were simply members of the public. In April 2024, I, meaning a person who, a former Housing Committee member, had engaged Mike Miller as a member of the Montpelier Housing Committee to request the current draft of the housing chapter. Mike refused access to this document, requested to review it with him, and stated that the Housing Committee could have access to it when it was made public. The Planning Department also refused to provide access to the comments and feedback on the master plan to the Housing Committee when asked. Mike Miller failed to meaningfully engage with the Housing Committee further from April 24 through April 25 on any content related to the process, timeline, or need for feedback. Any updates that were potentially made were not engaging of the committee as a key stakeholder. During the April 1st, 2025 meeting, the Planning Department wholesale disregarded the feedback from the Housing Committee that had been working on for 9 months to develop, and again failed to engage or share the timeline throughout the process. This was a key effort of the council that Mike was very aware of throughout that was occurring, documented in minutes and aligned with the timeline that had been shared and never updated. Council should consider what steps are taken to support city committees and ensure that their efforts are aligned with the goals of council, proactively engaged by city departments and engaged as key constituents in this process. The Planning Department has shown continued indifference, that's a typo, corrected, towards the Housing Committee, failed to engage the group proactively during major projects, and when fully aware of the committee's work, failed to accept feedback that had been provided. This sort of disregard for committees makes the efforts of those involved a complete waste of time. So I think that's more powerful and more succinct, and that's from a resigned Housing Committee member. Now, I'll speak briefly to what Tori said. I was instrumental in the formation of the homelessness task force 5 years ago. I leaned on the council extensively to get that formed, and it had accomplished nothing in the 5 years since. It's a coffee clutch of well-meaning, caring people, but they don't get anything done. We don't have any more bathrooms. We don't have any more showers. No one leveraged
See, we're
to.
trying to organize a proactive, like, move. You're right. We need.
No,
to hear
but let
this
me-
feedback, but
let-
like, can we move
Yeah,
forward,
well,
please?
yeah, but it's an informal meeting, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have a 2-minute clock. We're not gonna, it's a pipe dream to think that we're gonna get housing for these hundreds of people in the next 3 to 5 years, okay? So we need to be looking at emergency shelters, modest shelters with walking distance to showers and toilets. And nothing short of that. I've been studying this for years and years. And
See, we're trying to organize the Housing Committee meeting. Like, I get it, and we're looking forward to your participation, but could you like come to a close so that we can continue about like our next steps forward?
this is part of the Housing Committee, is how do we get the people who are in the streets? So I don't appreciate you trying to cut me off while I'm relaying very valid information. So the logic in proposing that that emergency housing be part of the Housing Committee's scope is that the urgency of it, the Housing Committee should be filled with people who want to get things done. They look at where the money's going to come from. They look at, full shelters and soft shelters. They know how to get things done. It's not advocates, it's doers and planners. And emergency housing should be part of that scope so that we can move that forward too, not it be somebody else's job. So that's my logic.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I understand it. Are you suggesting that the Housing Task Force Committee should remain separate or should be kind of
what I'm hearing in an evolutionary way is that the homelessness task force sees the need or wants to become a regional think tank. And I think that that's fine if they want to be a regional think tank and team up with Barry and Berlin and think. But I think homelessness should be part of the scope of work of the housing committee so that we've got emergency shelter solutions with plumbing, with water, with sewer, and ready by winter.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Carrie?
Yeah, so I was looking over the charge
Yes,
of the
thank
committee, which is on the website, and it's a little general. It's kind of broad in general. And I think it would be great if the city council would give the committee a little bit more direction than what's here. And so we could make recommendations, or the committee can make recommendations to city council saying, here's what might be a good charge, or we can just really prod city council to do that.
Carrie, would you mind if I actually read the charge?
Yeah,
and then
go
we
ahead.
just get some feedback on that? Like, I would love to hear what you're thinking and from other folks as well. So this is the charge of the Housing Committee as currently stated. The Housing Committee's mission is to gather and evaluate housing-related information from a wide variety of sources, propose responses to identified housing concerns, recommend policies and programs to the City Council that support the housing aspirations of the City of Montpelier Master Plan, educate the public about Montpelier's housing situation, and advocate for policies and proposals that advance the goals of Montpelier City Master Plan.
And oversee the housing trust fund, which isn't listed in the mission,
isn't
but
listed.
that is part of the job. Yeah.
I wouldn't know.
Don't know.
I wonder, yeah, I'm sorry, Tori.
I actually did, as soon as I sat down and took a breath, did remember the other thing that I wanted to say, and it's important, I think. The thing that struck me most with the well-publicized resignations from the Housing Committee was that all of the female members seem to have left, as well as the one male member who was actively involved in working directly with unhoused people in Montpelier and still is. As I'm a person who pays a lot of attention to issues of gender and culture and racism. And I think in any organization, if you suddenly lose all of the members of one gender or any identity group, it's essential to examine very carefully, how did that happen? You might examine it carefully and discover it was completely irrelevant, but you need to examine it carefully. And I'm looking forward to hearing how that investigation has happened with the Housing Committee.
Thanks, Tori.
Thanks.
I'd like to, if we could continue with the charge of the committee
Yeah.
and just get I would love to hear from you, Carrie, about like what parts are too broad, how we could refine it. And certainly for members of the committee, if you have ideas about, parts that should be added or struck, or are you, do you think it would be a good idea for the city council to take another look at this charge and try and refine it in a certain way?
So I'll go ahead. What's really striking me about reading this and listening to this conversation that we're having about what has happened in the past is the committee's charged with recommending policies and programs to the city council that further the housing aspirations in the city plan. But the city plan is already written and has all kinds of detail and specific things in it. And so there is really, honestly, there's no place for this housing committee to make recommendations for that, because those are already done, right? And which is part of the problem. So that needs to be changed somehow. So maybe the city council needs to be a little bit more specific about what kind of recommendations they want. Maybe it's, supporting the initiatives that are already in the city plan. Maybe it is asking for something completely different and being open to that, not just being open, but, taking it seriously and doing something with that recommendation.
First of all, I don't know either of you two or them, but I don't know either of you three that were on it. You don't know me, so I'm just gonna give you a brief history of my bit with this. In 1999, I was one of 7 or 8 people that formed the original Montpelier Housing Task Force. It was a guy, I forget, Martin Hahn. He was a visionary and he put together a city meeting that anybody could come to talk about what he saw going to be housing issues down the road. Nobody was talking about housing then. And a bunch of us went to it. I was brand new to council my first year. I went to it. He said, I want to form a group. Is anybody interested? And I said, yeah, I am. So we formed it. It was had a housing task force. And the first year we didn't do anything. We didn't have any money. We didn't have any staff. So the second year I offered to bring them under the council's umbrella. And that's how it got involved with the city. And I was the first chair of the housing committee task force. And we were part of the ones that originally established the fund that you're talking about. So I've had a lot to do with housing in those years. I was really the only member of the council in those years that was interested in housing at all. So I got to be called the housing advocate. So that's why I'm back. When I got back on the council in March, one of the first things I wanted to do was go to your first meeting. And I talked to my neighbor, Emma Zavas. I don't know if you know her. She was on. He said, now I'm on the council, I want to go to. And she said, oh, I resigned. And she told me why. She says, it seems like a waste of time. Nobody's listening to us. And I don't want to have any, I don't want to. He said, okay, well, I'm going to go to the meeting. It was canceled. So I never got to go to it. This is the first time I've gotten. I've been itching to get back in because I remember we had a very effective group. You know, just that housing trust fund, we actually did a apartment registry, put out pamphlets for them to know their rights and stuff like that. We actually assisted to create those apartments down by the co-op that you look at. And I had to go before the housing task force twice on my own to testify to get it. So we actually definite charges. And I'm going to say right now, one of the problems with what you had, I don't think it was communication. I think it was leadership. I don't think you had good leadership from the council on it because they're the ones that should have stepped up and got you back, said, hey, we're getting off course, or hey, this should have been done. Honestly, when I saw that those recommendations you all worked hard on and then got thrown, you know, told us too late, I would have said, no, it's not late. And I would have councilors who were on it should have done that. And that's why you quit. You didn't have good leadership. I'm here to try to get good leadership because I don't like to waste my time, quite honestly. I sit on a lot of committees. I go to lots of meetings. I chaired a lot of committees and I know how to get things done. And I want to help you get things done. And I want to get things done because I think it was leadership that failed you. Everybody went away. It's sad that we lost all of 1-6. That's not a good sign at all. So we'll try to get some women on. And I think he has zeal and passion to try to get something out of this. So you got 2 new people that were not on before that we want to see this become functioning. And I'm willing to put my time into it. And so I just wanted to let you know my history, why I'm here. I want to see us do something, and I want to see your time be meaningful. Otherwise, I'm not going to be here. So that's where I'm at.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. I mean, I think just in terms of like actually moving forward, if we're going to recruit kind of new members and things like that, I think really a clear step is clarifying the charge, right? That council's comfortable with, that folks who are going to serve on this committee are comfortable with, right? And then really identifying those shared priorities. And I think a big mistake to pick 10 of them and get none of them done. Pick 2 for the next 6 months that, we would try to work on, and I think if we can get consistent updates back and forth, then hopefully, we'll have that communication and leadership that will allow things to move forward. The other thing that I would just mention is, the council did request a housing needs assessment be conducted in the Vermont Housing Finance Authority, format, and that is underway right now at the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. My understanding, I talked to Pamela yesterday, that they've collected the data. They're in a place where they're ready to kind of present a draft. And I think this is the place where they would do that. And so, she would like to come to September 3rd meeting, present what they've collected so far, and then kind of like look for additional direction, right? In terms of, here's the information we gathered. How can it be helpful in informing some of these strategies, or what have we learned from it? I don't think she's coming in necessarily with like, here are the 5 things that need to happen. I think she's coming in with, here's some good information. It would be great to reach out to some partners, collect more, and then work collaboratively to think about what the strategies are. So in terms of like, what does this group do to actually get stuff done? I think clarifying the charge, having a conversation about some really specific goals, and then really taking a first peek at that housing needs assessment and thinking about how it can inform the work.
September 3rd is a council meeting or a housing meeting?
I believe it's a housing council meeting.
Okay.
I believe I might have the date wrong, Steve.
But it's a meeting where the remains of the housing committee is coming together with the council?
No, it's just,
We're gonna try. I mean, I don't know if we'll have a quorum, but we're gonna try to convene a meeting of the housing committee, and we're gonna hear from Pamela at the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission on what they've learned through the housing needs assessment thus far.
So Tuesday is the 2nd,
Sorry.
Wednesday's the 3rd. So if it's Tuesday, then it would be the 2nd.
Yeah, sorry, my
Okay.
bad.
Nope. just
Tuesday the
making sure we're-
2nd. Yes, we are. I just want to make sure though that we're on the same page. Does that sound like a reasonable kind of next steps?
Yeah, I agree. That sounds like a good next step. But I think clarifying that scope, clarifying the charge over that time, I think will help a lot with recruitment as well. I think so people have a reasonable expectation of what they're getting,
What they're signing up
getting
for.
into, what they're signing up for.
Dan or Deanna, any feedback?
Yeah, just as closing thoughts, thinking about when, who resigned when, going back to the start of the committee, I think the people that took on the most ended up burning out or ended up leaving. So that was true of the first chair, whose name I'm forgetting, but she worked a lot on the Housing Trust Fund. Yep, Diane. Yep. That was true of Emma, who was second chair, worked on the Housing Trust Fund rules and short-term rental. It's true of Rebecca and Amanda, who spearheaded the housing plan stuff. And I think that to some degree we're I don't want to say limited because it's people with energy and with an idea that end up making the biggest difference on the committee. For my part, I'm parent of 2 small kids and chapter president of my union, so I'm reluctant to dive head on into chairing. Not to say that wouldn't be on the table in the future, but one of the reasons I'm still around is that I haven't dug in.
Yeah,
I did not have high personal stakes in what the outcome was.
understood. Yeah. I mean, I had a conversation with Rebecca this afternoon just about kind of like lessons learned. And one of the things that, she suggested was just because of that burnout, I mean, this is a really intense issue with a lot of work to do. And, that having co-chairs she felt was really valuable. right? And so I just offer that as like, as we think about this moving forward, how do we make it sustainable for people? You know, so that they don't get burned out and yet also feel like there's momentum and meaningful. The co-chair model might help with that.
Well, I think really we need to make sure that you're heard and that we appreciate what you're bringing to it. I mean, if you don't feel like you're being heard and nobody's listening to you, you're not going to stay. So, I mean, when I had the committee, everybody was heard. We went round. I didn't let people not being heard. I said, come on, you wanted to do this. I want to hear from you. So I want you all to speak up. It can't just all come from us. I mean, this is why you're signing up. I want you to know that we want to make this meaningful for both of you, three of you. I'm sorry, forget about the online, but you know, and I'd like to, hopefully we can get some new blood that, you know, wants to get going on this, but really it's all about making it worthwhile. Nobody wants to be on a committee that just seems like it's going nowhere. So I want to see this committee do some things. We really did some things in the past. I can go and show the fingerprints what we did, but I hope that you two will stay on and want to be part of this new team because we're bringing in a new leadership team here. I mean, Ben's got a lot of energy on this, and I always have had a lot of interest in this. So it's two new people that you didn't have before that hopefully are going to infuse a difference in this.
Well, and I also just want to acknowledge too that like I feel like we're, and I'm speaking for myself, being a little heavy-handed in the direction tonight of just like wanting to get this started. And yet at the same time, like this is not our committee, right? It's a partnership that will be chaired by citizens who volunteer for this, who will run the meetings, right? Like, I'm sorry to, you know, that we're being so, but I think just to get the ball rolling. And then, you know, my goal really is to come to these meetings and listen and contribute somewhat, but like really be the liaison back to the full council.
Yeah, that's where I'm coming from as well. I don't see us as leading this committee. You all will elect a chair and you will do your own leadership, but that constant back and forth so that you know that you're doing work that is actually beneficial to the city council and that and vice versa.
And I would also say like hold us accountable to that.
Yeah.
Right? Like if we're tasking you to like work on things and then we say, never mind when you produce the work product, like hold it, you know. So I think what I'm hearing in terms of next steps is that maybe the three of us can do some work on refining a charge that we can, you know, that we can work with the full council to make sure that we get real specific on it. At our next meeting, we would hear from Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission on the housing needs assessment. And then, you know, my hope is that we could really start to narrow in on, you know, that everybody's clear. These are the two things we're working on for the next 6 months, right? The other thing is, going back to Steve's point, we need to get more members. And I think, you know, just saying in this meeting, we need more members isn't gonna cut it, right?
To have a good recruitment.
Right.
I mean, we need to get out there and let it be known. I mean, I'll be glad to put something on Front Porch Forum.
Great.
And saying that, I'll be glad to talk about it in our meetings that Carrie and I have. Hey, we're looking for this. We're looking for people who want to make a difference in this. I look at this as a new start. So I hope you all are looking at this as a new start. Let's put the past behind us. We try to learn from it, but that's really all the past is good because I think this is going to be a new start. That's what I want to see. And I think that's what you want to see is let's go out and make a new start. Let's try to make a difference and let's make it meaningful for ourselves. So that's why I'm here. Great. I don't like to sit on committees that just endlessly talk and don't do anything. So
Jim, you wouldn't mind putting something on Front Porch Forum, advertising for new?
Not at all. I will bring it up in our meeting at the end of the month when we have citizens come in. Hey, do you know anybody? Not just the ones that are there. Do you know anybody?
No, exactly. Yeah.
We need to get the word out. That's the best way that people will respond and come to us. So
I think it'll be really.
You do that before you decide to shrink it to 7.
Okay.
Because you could end up with a vibrant 9-person.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Steve, because we can always shrink it to 7.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, there was a list of several committees.
I'm just gonna do one for this one. I'm gonna do this one. I'm gonna say that, you know, I'm part of it, and I'm gonna enlist the other two counselors who are part of it and say, hey, we're interested in, you know, you signing up with Uncle Sam.
It's important to distinguish that this is a refreshed committee, that
Yeah.
It's not the same committee that had the mass resignations that
Yeah.
you're seeking to. And can I also ask if one of you if Dan's an architect, and I think I'd like to hear what he thinks is realistic for this committee to take on. I don't want to start critiquing the city plan's shortcomings tonight, although I could, it take too long. But my point is, what's a realistic scope that would help inform y'all as you try to rewrite the chart?
I appreciate that. I just want to just close the loop on communicating our recruitment strategy, and then let's come back to that. And Evelyn, I'm kind of looking at you, and just in terms of like, do you have additional strategies that you can help with to spread the word?
Charge, that would be a nice way to get it out there, get some earned media coverage too.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's real important, like what he said, that we look upon this as a new start. We want to make this really relevant again. And, you know, we got to make it, we got to make people, you know, to think that, okay, this is something I want to join.
Yeah.
Start that quickly in order to get that as part of the recruitment.
I don't know if we can do that, Steve, but you know, I think I'll be able to write something up that will, you know. Yeah. So let's just work on recruitment.
But I think the point to look to the recruitment, if you're gonna, because I do agree with Steve's point of making the clear that it's the difference. This is a new committee looking forward, which I think is the same points both of you made as well, that we're looking forward, we're not dwelling. But I think that's not just putting everything behind, because I think I think as Ben was saying, really looking at that, whether it's looking at the Venn diagram between what's in the master plan and what the housing committee had come up with, or I think the work that the housing committee did come up with, possibilities of opportunities. There's a lot over those few years of things that could be done that really could make a big difference if there was a big infusion of money to actually solve the problem. There were also things that could be done, you know, kind of not on the budget side, but through communication, through, as you're saying, surveys, connecting to people, getting out things like Home Share Vermont, other communications of what programs already exist, the ADU programs and things. But I think where kind of on that whole continuum of options the charge comes, I think will be important in doing both communicating that it's not just words that we're a new committee, but we actually do have direction. We do have a renewed commitment and focus from City Council, better communication between the council and the committee on the charge. So I'm not saying you need to have that charge all done before you start doing the communication out there, but I think at least telegraphing that these are the steps that are coming forward. And if you want to join us as City Council does its part and the committee does its part, I think that would help.
Thank you.
I think that sounds right.
Yeah. So you had things to do with Home Share.
Home Share, we did have meetings with Home Share. I think helped promote an open house that they had, and some of the communications around getting the word out to people for Home Share.
That's important to me because I was the one that actually brought that to the city from Burlington. I'd never heard of it till a person said to me, why don't you have it in Montpelier? I want to get somebody to share my home. I said, what is it? And he gave me a contact in Burlington. She came down and said, here's the program. I'll help you set it up. So we actually got a grant and set that up. That was done when I was on the council. That was another thing we did, and it took off and it worked. And I'd love to hear what you have to say about it sometime, how it is going now, because I've kind of lost touch. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your history. We're going to need the history from you because we don't have it.
So happy to have more discussion, but I'm also thinking like we've got some really concrete next steps that we could just move forward on. And so what I'm looking to you three is I feel like we have work to do to help like start the process of revising a charge and bringing it to council. And I know I don't think it's currently on the agenda, but I think we could do that for the next meeting and try and spend some time on it, make sure we're getting input from the full council. Carrie, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the agenda. It has not been posted yet, right? Oh, yeah. Okay, so great. We'll.
I'm just thinking Kelly's
for it to be
board.
on the agenda.
Okay?
Yeah,
But like,
yeah, yeah.
I think, we could probably find time for this, right?
I think we need to, and
Yeah.
even if it's just brief, we need to build in that time for the back and forth, not just we say, here's what happened, but get input from the rest of the council.
It's got to be.
Yeah.
A small agenda item to start,
It could be iterative. You could
Yeah.
add more to the charge, a month from now, once you've got a full.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm just thinking like, I don't want us to kind of just like literally go off in a room and write a charge and then be like, here, right? I think we can try to provide more direction from the council point of view and then truth test it with you folks to see like, as Steve was asking about Dan, like Dan, from your point of view or any of your point of view, like what's viable given time,
And what do they think? What do the existing members think about unhoused soft shelter solution, emergency shelter solution?
Yep.
Yep. Because that fundamental needs to be either in or out of the charge.
Yeah. Good. I'm going to suggest that we end right there because I feel like we've got work to do and we could talk for the sake of talking, or we could like go home and start revising. Like, I think maybe we should do that unless Dan and Sean, I just personally really want to thank you for showing up.
Yeah.
And like, I'm really looking forward to working with you. And I think you can hear from the three of us a real commitment to honor your work and to be communicative.
Thank you. Yeah, and likewise. Thank you, and likewise, just on the last point that Steve raised, which I think is worthy of a little bit of discussion, even if it can be short. I do feel like the charge of the housing committee and the charge of the homelessness committee are separate enough that they should remain separate committees. I think there's a large a housing affordability issue that is very acute with those that are losing housing, and that there are sectors of overlap, but that the planning issues and the municipal plans for developing housing are long-term. That said, I think there's the biggest overlap there is where. I think that I think that there can be a conversation between the homelessness task force and housing committee over, where we make available for people to live.
We are going to have a connection because I'm going to be on their committee too. So I can be the connection between the two groups.
Yeah. And sorry, Tori, just for background on me, I work for the Vermont State Housing Authority. So working with the unsheltered folks is my daily work. So just to add that bit of background.
Thank you. Tori?
The things I wanted to mention very concretely is I know that Sal Alfano and Steve Whitaker, between the two of them and maybe some other people, have some what I think are excellent and very concrete ideas about creating housing for unhoused people. And I'm not, I would say get one or both of them on the committee, on the housing committee, and turn those ideas into reality.
Thanks, Tori.
We can't have Sal on it.
Any other kind of closing thoughts from anyone? Mike?
Just interject. One thing that used to be a part of the housing task force and for council to consider when you're appointing members going forward is the old housing task force used to have a requirement for having a representative for renters. And a lot of times when these committees get appointed for the housing, it's just by the way, it turns out we end up with a lot of homeowners. And so it used to be a requirement to make sure there was a certain number of seats
I think
of renters to make sure that we do.
There still is.
There still is,
a
okay.
requirement of 2.
That's a
Okay.
good. Yep. Thanks.
I didn't know if that was in there, but it should be there.
For bringing that up, Mike.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we're recruiting, make sure we
I
get.
was the renter when it started. I was the renter.
Yes.
So I think, Jim, just want to close the loop on this. You're going to write, we're going to go forward, even though we don't have the finalized charge, we're going to telegraph the idea that we're refining the charge. You're going to put a thing out on Front Porch Forum. Evelyn, you're going to do similar things through your channels. But I also think just like us, right? Like just thinking about folks that we know in this community that really care about housing, or like you, Dan, have like a specific expertise in that field. I think we really need to start calling some people.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that, Mike, about the rental seat. I did not know about that. And I think that that's excellent, that we should definitely get that representation.
Yeah, that's why we did the rental thing.
Yeah, that's great. Good. I'm going to go home.
Thanks everybody for